Great. So it looks like we are live and on air. So, all right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon to hear from Amanda Ravenhill at Project Drawdown. Amanda is the executive director there and is going to be speaking a little bit about the work they do, their vision, and how it relates to agriculture and climate change and that kind of nexus that is happening there. So before we jump in, though, I'm going to kind of kick it over to Doran Cox for a little bit, who's going to give us a little background on the learning series here and kind of how it came to be, and I guess what our overall goals are as well. So Doran, go ahead, take it away.
Great, thanks so much, Dan. I'm going to do a quick screen share to walk through this. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Great. So the spark for this idea came from a State of the Soil meeting that was held earlier this year when a group of scientists, engineers, and advocates came together and at the Pacinas Ranch for a few days to share our common objectives and concerns. And what came out of that was really a very clear need for developing monitoring tools to highlight some of the bright spots in regenerative agriculture, the kinds of things that are happening all over the country but have yet to be documented fully or recorded at the nation's research farms. And because we haven't had a lot of great data, our environmental models and modelers have not been able to incorporate that data back in to provide feedback for producers and to create environmental markets or to create policy around those best practices that we know are already working. So what we're doing, what we came up with out of that meeting was really that within our immediate group there, we had a lot of the pieces that we thought could help solve this problem, both the modelers and the practitioners, and a lot of the skills with folks from around the country. Now, of course, not everybody, we have a lot of folks to bring into that conversation. And so that's what we felt, that to allow for some of that emergence to make this process more transparent and to bring more folks into the conversation and to move towards some tools and solutions, that we would start a series to dive in a little bit more in depth with a number of the projects that are ongoing that really seem that could start to fill those gaps by identifying common barriers and points of collaboration. And so one of the things that we're going to do, and to keep in mind as we go through these series of presentations, is to start to look at how these different pieces fit together. And so we're going to be mapping our ecosystem while we're going through these presentations. We're also taking notes and thinking about how these different projects fit in with one another, from projects that are primarily about landscape observation or about farmer action and recording on-farm practices, to the commerce and economics, to projects that are primarily analytic or academic, or are on the research and development process. So we're going to be, as we go through these, we'll be taking notes and filling this map in. So, for example, we have last week's call, which is a Comet Farm, which is an environmental model that will provide actionable feedback back to the farms. Next week, I'll be presenting about Farm OS, which is primarily about farmer action and land management, farm record keeping. And then today we're going to hear about Project Drawdown, which is an educational process to bring together a number of those, number of the solutions from around the country and provide some feedback to the general public as far as where to take action. And so we'll be recording those common barriers, and then looking at what are the tools, the common tools that we can use together and develop together, or that already exist that we can use in collaboration, from observational tools to better analytic tools, to ways in which we can facilitate communication across the spectrum, and then ultimately, how does that affect taking action on the landscape that will affect the kind of change that we all want to, that's driving the desire for this group to work together. So that's the quick summary, and I'll hand it back to Dan and Amanda, and I'm really excited to continue this conversation in week 2 of the learning series.
Great. Thank you, Doran, for that great introduction. Great. So before we jump in with Amanda, I'm going to kind of read off our 2 guiding questions that we are going to be using to guide our presentations and try and generate some good conversation and look for points of collaboration. And the first being, what are you doing, which we'll hear about in a minute from Amanda, and what are the barriers that collaboration might help with? And question number 2, how do you envision your project, program, or tool helping farmers to improve their efforts in regenerative agriculture? So just kind of keep those in mind as Amanda goes through her presentation, and after the fact we'll have some time for conversation and question and answer. And with that,
All right. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. All right, so I'll go ahead and start sharing my slides here, and we'll run through those questions that Daniel just asked, and then hopefully have some time for some interesting conversation as well. All right, is that showing up?
Not yet.
Okay.
right now I'm just seeing a dark screen.
Just one dark screen.
Oop, there we go.
All right.
Got it.
But you can see all the other slides, right? Let's see, slide only. Is that a dark screen again?
It is.
Try to make it so that you don't see all the other stuff, but let's see here. All right.
There we go.
All right.
It's good enough. Has that weird slide bar, but that's fine. All right. So I'll be introducing Project Drawdown and talking about some of the barriers that I see that I think this collaboration could help with. And some of these barriers aren't necessarily technical, but are more kind of communication barriers that I see within the larger climate change and climate solutions field. And then we'll finish up by brainstorming together how people think that this information could be used to help farmers and the larger regenerative agriculture field. If I can get to the next slide. Technical difficulties, excuse me. Here we go. Excellent. So, drawdown is defined as the point at which greenhouse gases in the atmosphere reach their peak and then begin to decline on a year-to-year basis. So this is a new goal that we're trying to introduce into the climate conversation, and it's important because it moves us beyond this idea of kind of stabilization at a high parts per million concentration. There's a lot of people talking about, you know, staying at a 2-degree world or staying at 450 parts per million, and we think that this goal of drawdown and actually coming back down to safe levels of concentrations of greenhouse gases in our atmosphere can really bring more people to the movement and also just bring more empowerment to those people who are around. It's a much more positive goal. So this is the climate march last September. There was 1 million people around the world who took to the streets, and it was a kind of a milestone moment for the climate movement. But we noticed that there was no one there kind of marching with the full manual of all of the climate solutions that we have, in our toolbox. And we noticed that people, are mainly focused on the climate solutions like solar and wind, which are very important and powerful and have become kind of symbols of the climate movement, and not as focused on the solutions kind of right below their feet, if you will, with soil carbon. So that's what we're doing with Drawdown, is we're creating the manual. It's a manual for a safe climate future. We're collating the best available information on 100 different climate solutions and calculating their economic, ecological, and social impact over the next 30 years. And we've started a fellowship program with PhD and graduate students from all over the world who are helping us bring together this information and build this kind of new model that looks at the future of the next 30 years. And it's what we call the optimistically plausible future. So it's kind of on one end of the spectrum of possibility, but a really positive one. And we find that when people hear these stories of all of these solutions that can be implemented, their whole kind of attitude towards climate change shifts. And they shift from what we call climate fatalism, which is this kind of dark climate cloud that hangs over many of our heads, to this vision of a climate-inspired renaissance, that so many of these solutions have not only climate benefits, but these cascading benefits, and that the world could be a much better place. We can solve a lot of the kind of underlying root causes that have caused climate change by implementing these solutions. So one of the barriers that we see is this kind of chase for the silver bullet. There's a lot of academic research and reporting and communications out there about how renewable energy alone won't save us, or controlling population growth alone won't save us, or eating less meat won't save the planet. You can see these headlines here. And I also see it within the regenerative agriculture movement, that people kind of focus just on one solution. They get really excited about it, whether it be biochar or compost or mushrooms, and they tend to kind of throw out the other solutions, throw out the baby with the bathwater. They might say, oh, biochar isn't what it's all cracked up to be, so therefore it's not, it shouldn't be studied. And I think that kind of siloed thinking and search for the silver bullet is part of that kind of linear thinking. It's what got us into this mess in the first place. So one of the barriers I see is really being able to kind of function from this new, more systems view place, and looking at many different indicators instead of just kind of the chase for that linear silver bullet solution. So I invite everyone who's listening now or listening to this recording later to just start noticing when you hear other people or hear yourself kind of stuck in that older mindset, and just ask yourself if it's helping or if it's maybe hindering the longer term process. And so this is just some quick sketches I did last week or 2 weeks ago at the CalCan Summit, the California Climate and Agriculture Network Summit. And I was noticing how many different indicators people were talking about. That's the kind of top piece here, in terms of success for their farms. They weren't just talking about crop fertility. They were talking about increased water retention and resilience to extreme events, and an increase in the mycorrhizal network. And I noticed just how many indicators were being marked and appreciated. And I thought this was a really neat way of kind of looking at the system from a more systemic view, and shifting just from looking at crop fertility as our success point, but also looking at, increased habitat for farm animals, wild animals, and pollinators, and how biodiversity is really one way to sum up an indicator that appreciates a lot of different components of the system. Great. So the solutions that we're looking at with Drawdown are they're beyond just the kind of decarbonization of our energy infrastructure. We find that a lot of the other solutions groups that are similar to ours are very much just focused on that. And there's that barrier of understanding that it's not just about decarbonizing our economy, but really about, in addition, recarbonizing our soil and our agriculture. So Project Drawdown, we're not just looking at regenerative agriculture solutions, we're looking at all of them and really trying to do our best job at kind of weaving this tapestry of climate solutions so that people can see how they all work in context, and that there's kind of something for everyone to do here. So we're looking at the technological solutions, also some social solutions, which are harder to research but are really important, like educating girls and family planning, and also looking at some of the dematerialization solutions. And of course, we're looking also at the ecological solutions, which is, where our research is kind of the richest. There's a lot of new research on these bright spots within regenerative agriculture, and this is why we're so excited to be part of this group. So another barrier that we see is people just feeling really complacent. They feel like they can only do so much, and that they're doing everything they can about climate change, but they want to do more. And we find that need for empowerment and the need for people to understand that they have agency or decision-making power over more than just their household, but they have the ability to influence their community, the businesses they work in or businesses they support, the buildings they live in, the cities they either work for or live within, and similar with utilities, and then finally land. So this is the list of land solutions that we're working on now. It's a list in progress, and we're very interested to work with people within this group to hone this list even more. We'll be doing the bulk of the research over this summer with our summer fellows. But so yeah, just to talk a bit about this barrier, it's about, and I want everyone in this group to think about this when implementing our solutions, is how do you instill that empowerment in people to really feel like they can take that next step and make decisions that will enhance the adoption of all of these different solutions. So these are the three ways that we're going to kind of amplify our research. We're going to have a global book that'll be published in many countries around the world. We'll have an interactive platform, Drawdown Interactive, that we hope can be part of this Open Ag Association in one way or another, depending on how we end up designing it. And then finally, we also have this Drawdown database and API, which is kind of a part of the interactive program, but it's a way for people to see what the Drawdown Interactive tool is built from and be able to use that as a building block for making their tool that they already have stronger, or building a new tool or platform or communication device. So those are kind of our three different buckets. The third one, the Drawdown database and API, is really where our coalition shines. We're building a beautiful, diverse coalition globally of everyone from young students to policymakers and investors, entrepreneurs, artists, who are all really excited about getting into the numbers of climate change solutions and how they can best communicate that to their core audience. So this is a mock-up of one of the pages from our book, LED light bulbs, super powerful solution. About 20% of global electricity is used by lighting. LEDs are extremely efficient. But this is the kind of spread that we're going for. Again, this is just a mock-up, but kind of a mix of numbers and some interesting historical anecdotes and surprising facts about each of the solutions. And now moving kind of more into the technical barriers. So we're doing this great amount of research on all of these different solutions, and particularly within regenerative agriculture, we need we would like to work with everyone in this group to find some sort of common place to track the latest and the best science, literature, and data points that are monitoring these bright spots within regenerative agriculture, because then that will make our 3 products stronger, which will then make all of these 5 core audiences that we have more informed. So we're really excited to function with this group and research together, and then also be able to communicate all of the research that's being done, and be able to be kind of a megaphone out there for all of this work that's being done. This is a little image that I made at the State of the Soil, kind of off of Sally Calhoun's drawing that she made on the whiteboard down there. And if you'll see kind of the bright spots over on the right, it's like within the old model, this old arc that's thankfully kind of being put into hospice now of old conventional agriculture. There's this bright spot of regenerative agriculture, this new wave, and we're going from kind of this scarce mindset to a more copious mindset. I made up little backronyms for those, and then a quote from my muse, Buckminster Fuller. He says that you never change things by fighting the existing reality. You build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. And you see that this new wave is not just happening within agriculture. This is, this kind of more holistic worldview is happening and shifting healthcare and education, business, even building practices. There's a lot of different ways that this kind of new wave is being expressed right now. And it's really an honor to be part of the regenerative agriculture piece of it. So that's kind of all I have on what we're doing and what the barriers I see. And I would love to have this part be really a conversation and a brainstorm with those that are here. But the final question on how do you envision your project helping farmers improve regenerative agriculture? And I have a lot of ideas. Of how our coalition can take all of this information and build new tools off of it. We're talking with PBS and NOVA to support them in their NOVA Labs, which is a citizen science program for middle and high school students, and a way for them to kind of interact with data and learn about climate change solutions. And I think most of the ideas I have right now and ones that are already kind of materializing are more along the lines of helping regenerative agriculture by helping kind of a wider audience, whether they be politicians or investors or students or artists, to be more informed. But I'd like to make any other farming tool kind of stronger through our research or stronger through our communication tools. And I'd love to hear ideas from people here about how to do that.
Great. Well, thank you, Amanda, for that summary. That's Project Drawdown seems like a very, very cool project. So it was great to get a nice, comprehensive overview of what it's all about.
Thanks.
Great. Well, and thanks too for structuring it well with kind of answering those 2 questions as we went through. But I guess so. Maybe just kind of put it out to the group what you were asking, and maybe see based on folks' responses to that presentation and how do they envision a tool like this, a resource like this, could be useful, particularly to farmers, and then and perhaps even to researchers and the folks that kind of make policy decisions. So just see that and open up the floor.
Yeah. Also open to any other questions that people may have.
Yes, yeah, that too.
Fantastic. Yep. And just a quick note to Peter Donovan just joined us, and I just wanted to. There was some background noise, so I temporarily muted him, but I hope he'll put his he'll unmute himself and jump in here. My comment is I'd love to have Peter jump in because he's and talk about how he sees his work that he's going to present in a couple meetings coming up with the atlas of biological work, how that fits in, and I'd love to also hear, Amanda, sort of based on the COMET model, how you would imagine the outputs from that fitting into the interactive tool that you're working on coming up. And but anyway, I'll turn it over to you to see where that goes.
Did you want Peter to start?
So that I was turning it over to you first,
Okay.
and I was hoping Peter would jump in after that. So it was
Okay,
too many. That was two items.
Excellent. Yeah, it was really illuminating to see kind of the ins and outs of Comet Farm last week and see the great work that they've done. It's kind of the exact tool that we've been imagining in terms of we've been imagining a lot of different tools that could use this research for kind of particular audiences, and partnering with people in our coalition who already understand those audiences well, instead of us trying to understand all the audiences in the world. Really just making other people's tools stronger. So I think we'll be able to hopefully find new data that might be helpful for Comet Farm and make their project stronger. And we have a really nice blend with Project Drawdown of serious academic rigor. We have a 3-stage peer review process, and some really solid researchers on our side. But then we also have the speed of just being a nonprofit and not being an official academic institution. So I think we'll be able to find some new information that Comet Farm and others may be able to use directly with farmers.
And where are you as far as working towards that API for integration with other models and being able to take outputs, both the inputs and outputs from your database? Sort of what's the process that you imagine and timeline that you see as far as developing that?
Yeah, it's something that's really in early stages, and that I hope this group and others will help us, co-create together. And in terms of timeline, we're doing the bulk of our research this summer, and we'll be doing a lot of the integration. So first we're doing research on each of the particular solutions, and then we'll be doing this integration model, which will be really interesting and a great lesson in systems thinking. And then in the fall, we'll be starting to work on kind of our alpha, first crack at our API and interactive database, and hope to launch it sometime next year in 2016.
Great. And do you imagine, soliciting data directly, or do you imagine that process will be primarily through other organizations and models that you have organizational relationships with, I guess? Do you have a direct, sort of a retail approach to it as well, I guess is my question.
Yeah, that's, largely our kind of theory is to just collect the best available information that's out there, and it's more at the kind of meta-analysis or research that's already been completed stage, rather than crunching the numbers ourselves or going out and finding data points. But in conversations with PBS and NOVA and others, there's definitely a place for citizen science and crowdsourcing within this, and I think it'll happen in the second stage when we're in the Drawdown interactive.
Right.
An API, but we could build in something, and it kind of depends on what happens with this group. Hopefully we could maybe all build something together, some common place where we could all share data and we could all be pulling from that. That wouldn't just be drawdowns, but could serve many different purposes.
Right. And
yeah, I think Kevin Brown expressed something similar that Comet could utilize something like that. And maybe it could be a place where specific data points come in, and we could give confidence to them, or tag them with the sources, or I'm not sure exactly how it would work, but we're interested to see how how crowdsourcing and citizen science could play into this.
Yeah, I mean, I see that as that the audiences that you'll reach could potentially have a lot of overlap with tools, not necessarily like PharmaOS that I'll be presenting on next week, but tools that are much more similar to that, but from a more general audience. It's not just about agricultural management. Peter and I have talked about sort of the iNaturalist type platform and figuring out how we tie that in with some of the kind of work that public laboratories also doing with, and we'll hear in the coming weeks, I think, from Photosync, who's working on low-cost observation devices and ways in which people can actively participate in data collection for that. So I think, and I think you're right. I think the tool will. I mean, I think that's one of the objectives of this group is to have tools like that become emergent, and they may have some common backbones, but be able to then be tailored to some of the audiences that you'll be able to reach.
Right, right. And what's unique with us is that we'll be blending it into, 70 odd more solutions that are for climate and don't have anything to do with agriculture. We have some solutions that aren't necessarily about soil carbon, but about agriculture still, like reducing food waste and low carbon diet that we're monitoring. So it'll be interesting to see how those all fit together as well.
Cool. I had a quick question. You were saying that a lot of what you're doing now is doing some meta-analysis to pull stuff out of papers. I'm wondering if you guys have looked into the possibility too. There's a lot of, particularly with agriculture and some of the different possible things that would fit under the heading of regenerative ag and soil carbon. There's a number of long-term experiments at universities or places like Rodale. Some of them already share their data, but some of them might be willing to share it if it's going into sort of this larger repository. And I just wondering if that's something you guys have considered or looked at, because I think having all the data from a bunch of those different experiments in a sort of a common format in one place could be super powerful.
Yeah, we have reached out to, we have a lot of different advisors who have been part of various, kind of decarbonization scenarios, who have lent us some of their data. We have a lot of contacts within the IPCC. They've obviously done a lot of work and globally monitoring this sort of thing. So we have a lot of the kind of background research and data instead of just the high-level meta-analysis from that. But yeah, it's something that our fellows this summer will be researching and looking into is what's out there and how we can get access to things and invite people who maybe haven't published before to be part of this. So great idea.
So Doran, I was wondering if maybe we kind of went off on a bit of a tangent there, but you had a question for Peter earlier?
Yeah, I was going to see if we could get Peter to jump in and see how he imagines the Atlas of Environmental or Biological Work might fit in this, or just in general, just to jump in here. Not to put you on the spot, Peter.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm missing part of this conversation. I jumped in late, but thanks, Amanda, thanks, Jordan, and Dan for doing this. Not a lot of background noise here. Is it too much?
It's good now. Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. I was wanting to ask Amanda to tell us a little bit about your sort of theory of change. What drives all these tools, and tell me a little bit more about your theory of change.
Yeah, thanks. Great question. So it's really about kind of giving people a new view of the future. Like I said before, I mentioned this, that people are kind of walking around with this dark climate cloud above their head. It's this kind of climate fatalism. And people want to do more, kind of feel like they don't have much more to do, and generally just aren't aware of the full set of tools in their toolbox. And especially how they add up. There's all these conversations right now in California, for example, about the drought and what's more powerful, taking less showers or not eating meat or watching what kind of meat you eat, or is it almonds or is it pistachios, and everyone kind of wants to know how does it all compare. And a similar thing's going on with climate change. People want to know, is it better to get solar panels on my house or become a vegan? And I think we can illuminate that whole toolbox for people and just make them feel like they have more decision-making power and agency over their future, and that it's more than just what they can do around the house, but that they can make decisions at every level of their life, whether it's their work or hobby or being an advocate. And so it's really about empowering people and giving them a new vision of the future, and giving a new goal to the movement too of drawdown. It's similar to 350.org, which is after the drawdown where we get. But even with that meme being very powerful and people talking about 350, there's still this conversation about staying at or below 2 degrees centigrade or staying at 450. And I think the point of drawdown and knowing that climate change can be temporary, that we can see drawdown and temperatures fall within the lifetime of people who are alive today. That's a completely new narrative that people aren't sharing, and I think it's really attractive. And we'll bring more people into the movement and acknowledge people that are maybe working on girls' education or farmers who don't realize that they could be climate activists or however they want to identify, but leaders in this kind of great transition that we have coming here with dealing with climate change, and I think in the process dealing with a lot of the kind of root system causes that got us into this mess in the first place.
And it occurs to me, Amanda, also that part of this is broadening the coalition and finding a lot of the common motivations, a lot of which aren't necessarily directly about climate change. Mm-hmm. That a lot of that aggregation that you're providing provides that larger systems view and brings in folks who are working on things that again you might not immediately associate with climate change, but may play an important role. But that may or may not be it's the most important motivator for it, but it doesn't mean that it won't have an effect.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and enumerating the cascading benefits is what we like to call them. The other things that result in any of these solutions being implemented really shows people that it's not just about carbon. It's about this greater transformation and that new wave.
Right. Well, and the model that you're talking about and the access to the data can be also used from some of these other perspectives, so that if the narrative is more about water capacity and dealing with drought or reducing runoff or nutrient management, the fact that it has a climate effect and that data also has these other sort of ancillary roles is not, that's great from your perspective, and you can build that narrative. But other people can build other narratives from that same work that collaborative work that we're putting together.
Exactly. And the narratives and communication piece, I haven't touched on this much, but it's a big part of what we're doing is not only just giving the database away, but giving a lot of really fun infographics and communication tools and slide presentations away so that people who want to communicate about this or incorporate it into something they're already communicating can. So we'll be doing a lot of visualizations and partnering with artists and graphic designers to take this information and make it into something that a lot of different audiences can understand.
The other thing that I think you sort of touched on a little bit, but has been brought up with conversations with this group in the past, and something we've talked about trying to generate out of these conversations is common definitions. And it seems that as your group is going through and cataloging, it seems like that is a perfect sort of fit to take on some of the housing of those and facilitation of building those common definitions. So I guess I'd just like to sort of put that out there towards you and see if that might overlap with some of the work that your interns are doing, or just get your feedback on that.
Yeah, that's a great idea. We're kind of defining a lot of the solutions, and not just we, our core team, or we, even us and our fellows, but our wider coalition. We're very collaborative and, have these 3-stage peer review process and a lot of different ways for people to have input into our decisions. But yes, we will be defining a lot of these solutions, and yeah, I like that idea to have even a wider kind of glossary. It's something that we've talked about before, is have some terms in there that that help people kind of understand and define exactly what these different systems views are. Like one of the ones we're looking at with energy is defining and helping people realize the importance of energy return on energy investment, that ratio within energy of how many essentially calories or energy units you're putting in for what you get out. So we could do similar things for the regenerative agriculture field. That would just help people, just by reading a definition, people could kind of see a shift and see the difference between kind of the linear and systems thinking.
I mean,
I'll catch that idea and
yeah, because I mean, I know we had some our short list was we've been using just in this conversation regenerative agriculture, but then we have there's restorative agriculture, there's resilient agriculture, and getting some of those definitions, at least for our own use, for our community's perspective, how we're defining those. And then I think another theme that came up in California was talking about carbon capture rather than sequestration as being more accurate as far as the way in which the carbon cycle actually functions. And so getting some of these active terms in use within this group and see, I think would be it'd be wonderful to have that sort of feed into the work that you're doing as well.
Yeah, I would love to have input from this group, and that would be a great outcome of this this series. Is just a beginning of that. I know, Peter Donovan, you're wordsmith and very mindful about what words you use. I would love to have your collaboration with that. And we're kind of at this spark of this new wave, and if we're intentional now about the words that we use and define them well, I think that could make this whole kind of revolution, if I may use that word, kind of stronger and faster and more potent if we're using the right words and have shared definitions from the beginning.
Yeah, I know in particular Peter's been talking about net primary productivity and biological work as being really important, and I think that comes into, I mean, if you're talking about some of these more technical definitions of regenerative agriculture, that's what you have to be looking at, and just like you were saying, net energy input to net energy output.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. If I could jump in here, just to note that in the energy sections of the New York Times, for example, you won't find the concept of biological work or power or energy unless it's biomass burning or something like that in a furnace or in a boiler. And so when people think of energy, it's just completely a small subset of what's really happening. And terminology too, I could go on and on about some of this, but made a post on our website recently from sequestration to investment, trying to get people thinking not in terms of sequestration, which is not how the carbon cycle works.
Right.
We don't use soil. Soils are not just a landfill for atmospheric pollution. Or, you know, lock up the perpetrator, evil carbon, and throw away the key, the kind of thing. But
right.
The carbon is constantly moving in and out of soils, and we don't want to stop the carbon cycle. We would like to slow it down, but we don't want to stop it. You might as well hold your breath, you know.
Well, and that's where I think that, you know, the investment and the banking metaphors, I think, work a little bit better.
Yes.
Capture is, I mean, in fact, in some sense, the carbon banking may be even preferable to carbon capture, in that you're earning interest in it when it's in that form, right? Biological interest.
Yeah, that's a great metaphor. Yeah, sometimes, I mean, if you think about stocks and flows, it's just about kind of increasing the stock of the soil carbon or the biomass carbon layers.
Right.
That only works if you're communicating to systems thinking people who understand what stocks and flows are, which isn't necessarily everyone.
Right, right. Yeah, I often think of sort of also looking at the metabolism of the landscape, but that also is a health metaphor as opposed to the finance metaphor, so it depends on where you're.
Amanda, I wanted to ask, thinking about Peter's question about the theory of change part, I'm interested in thinking or hearing your thoughts about how you would see farmers using this kind of resource, and just kind of thinking about it and how comprehensive it might be. I think it might be pretty nice because a lot of the information farmers are able to get that is sort of written in a way that's comprehensible for them, but then also is not behind the paywall, is just scattered. It's all over the place. Extension bulletins, things that kind of get randomly circulated. Mm-hmm. So just wondering where your guys' collective head is at in terms of making it a resource for farmers too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one of the ways we see, well, one of the ways, if you kind of just look at each of the three different pieces, or communication pieces, is that one, you know, this book could be handed to a farmer from that farmer's niece or, friend, and could be kind of the first introduction. Oh, wow, I could do something, and it's really important within the grander scheme of climate solutions. Then the interactive piece, that online piece, will be not only a way for people to kind of interact with the data and play with the models and toggle assumptions, and kind of, it'll be a fun, kind of gamified way of getting in there and learning more. But there'll also be kind of a marketplace of sorts there, where people can see other people and organizations that are utilizing our data and have tools out there. So, if we have this partnership with Comet Farm and Farm OS and all of these other people, that would be tools that would be accessible to people on the website there, and they could kind of dive in. Another thing we're researching are, say for biochar, we're looking at all of the best tools that are out there in terms of manuals and how-to guides, and really collecting all those resources that are out there. Like Comet Farm, they were saying last week, something they just really need our help with is just getting the information out there that they exist. And there's a lot of really wonderful tools out there that people might not know about. So we see ourselves kind of as this aggregator of other tools. So there's a lot of ways, and and we're just open. We're going to see kind of how the coalition develops and what the needs are. But I could see us working with groups to develop farmer-specific tools that complement whatever's out there, and also make whatever's out there stronger as well.
As you were talking, Amanda, it occurred to me a conversation with Peter Bick and some of the thoughts they've had around carbonation, around engaging the gaming community with some of these scenarios to make it possible. And they were saying partly for making a gaming tool for farmers to play out various scenarios.
Yeah.
But being able to put in their own data. But but looking at some of what the gaming community has done as far as user experience and entertainment value, even from that perspective. So
Yeah.
it seems like that might be a fun interaction when Peter Bick presents, to sort of see where that kind of conversation might go.
Yeah, we're talking with a group called I Matter Youth. It's a youth climate activist group, and they're working with Minecraft to build this pretty neat program where kids can go in and build their community in Minecraft, and then they can build it up with various climate solutions and see the impact of it. So it's kind of like a SketchUp meets a game meets SimCity, kind of all together. And so we could do something similar to that, and they'll be using our data to make it more data rich and holistic.
Cool.
We could do something like that with farmers. That would be really fun. And they could put in their actual data, create their actual farm in Minecraft and see how it would change.
Right. Just imagine Farmville, but with real data, with real farms.
That's the other thing I've been wanting to do, is get into about Farmville. And create kind of a regenerative agriculture version of it. That would be really fun.
That would be kind of cool. Yeah, there's been some work using games as sort of decision support tools in developing context for agriculture, and kind of letting people who are generally smallholders, and kind of let them play out for whom making decisions are pretty often much more high stakes. Letting them kind of play these games to on the computer to figure out, okay, if I choose this, and I think what people have found in doing that too is making ones that are kind of whole household, based on whole household models. So how do these decisions on my farm impact other things in my life too? And kind of incorporating, if you can, other types of soil data, so people can really sort of go through this decision tree and sort of look at how it impacts not only their farm or kind of their plot of land, but how it impacts their family and stuff like that. I think that it might be a little bit different trying to apply it to kind of more North American farms that are dealing with different sets of decisions, and the farm is perhaps a little more external to their family life, since it's operated more like a business than a livelihood. But there's some interesting work there, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it occurs to me that I know that in fisheries management and, the fish stocks game for managing the commons has been a really important sort of tool for decision support and building out scenarios and consensus around taking action around the commons. It seems like there's a real need for that in managing some of these commons that we have in agriculture, sort of some version of that. I'm just kind of thinking out loud as we go through that, but it seems like in systems management, gaming has a pretty strong history and a lot of literature behind it as far as how to construct those.
Yeah.
And but a lot of I think what was going on, a lot of those games weren't drawing on the incredible gaming communities that we now have in technology to be able to bring in more data and these much more rich interfaces.
Well, I think before we sign off here, I want to make sure we got to Peter and that question you had earlier, Dorn, about how something like the Atlas of Biological Work might fit in with Project Drawdown. Unless, Peter, when you present, I think you're presenting in a few weeks, if you wanted to address that more then, but...
Yeah, I definitely see the Atlas project as fitting into what Amanda's doing. Definitely, see a link. I think it's probably slanted a little bit differently though, and so it might be complementary. I mean, we're not going to do models. This is about actual time series data, which I'm always puzzled at how people don't really undertake that. And it's, you know, not that hard. We're one of the reasons we're concentrating on Landsat. Is there any way I can show my screen here, or?
Yeah, if you just click on the left-hand column, there's a green icon with a little arrow.
Yeah.
And then you'll be able to select whatever program you'd like to share. Or you could just do your entire screen.
Is that? Do you see that, or?
No.
Not yet.
Let's see. I'm trying to show another tab on my web browser, but I can't seem to.
Did you click on the button that says Share?
Yeah.
Bottom right.
Yeah. Choose what you'd like to share, and it just says all my applications, but I can't choose another tab on my browser.
Or you could just choose entire screen, and then you'll be able to just choose anything you'd like.
I have to select yeah, okay, choose entire screen.
Mm-hmm.
And then share, and then
Click over to the tab you'd like. There you are.
There we go.
Tamales Bay.
yeah, this is a screenshot of a Google Earth Engine composite normalized difference vegetation index, median filter to get rid of cloud artifacts. And this is for the entire year of 2014. This is the kind of stuff we're going to be doing and making available. And you see that most of our agricultural land, and this is, I think we're getting into Petaluma there. Yeah, over here is Petaluma. But you can see that there's a tremendous amount of agricultural land that's performing sort of under par, but we can really see this with Google Earth Engine and see some exceptions. Anyway, that's the kind of thing that, and this is a time series. I mean, we can go back to 1984 with Landsat. So.
Well, this
anyway,
is that's a great way to start to close up today, Peter, because we started with talking about the bright spots that we're trying to identify and quantify what's going on there, and be able to gather that data and make it actionable. And so that map illustrates that we'll be able to identify those on the landscape level.
To a certain extent. I mean, obviously, if you add a whole bunch of nitrogen fertilizer or irrigated desert, you're going to create a quote unquote bright spot. But the important thing here, I think, to note is that this is not based on philosophy or who's got the most fashionable idea or the most charismatic TED Talk. It's about results, and that's a different kind of conversation, I think, or it tends to be. It can be different.
Well, and I think what we'll see in a couple in some of the talks coming up is we're focusing on how do we gather the data on the ground to start matching up with those images.
Right.
Yep.
And how do we gather that data quickly and cost effectively? I think it's
so. Tune in next week.
Yeah.
Yes.
For more.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, thanks, Amanda. Thanks, Dan and Dorn.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
I was able to participate. I'm in a grocery store in Santa Cruz here, so.
Lovely.
Great.
Great. Well, thanks, Amanda. I guess we're going to stop the broadcast now, but if you guys wanted to hang out for a little bit longer and chat, I guess we could.
Will do.
Sounds great.
Thank you.